Welcome to the State of Nature 2024 talk series. This series of talks is one of the ways we're sharing the information contained in State of Nature 2024. This talk is about woodlands and hedges, and the information is taken from the 3 habitat surveys. 5 categories of woodland were identified in the Habitat Survey 2018, which is based on whether the trees are broadleafed, such as oak, or coniferous, such as pine. Categories are also based on the origin of trees, such as whether they occur naturally or not. The categories are semi-natural broadleaved woodland, planted broadleaved, planted mixed, plantation woodland, and planted coniferous. And we'll go into more detail about these later on. Only one category, semi-natural broadleaved, is classed as a priority habitat by the states of Guernsey. Habitats are prioritised depending on their level of threat, their ability to support a high diversity of species, presence of threatened or rare species, and their local and international conservation needs. Semi-natural broadleaf woodland is the most abundant type on Guernsey, and it accounts for 3.2% of Guernsey's total area, according to the 2018 Habitat Survey. Overall, woodland has increased from 380 hectares in 2010 to 498 hectares in 2018 in Guernsey. This is due to planting and natural succession of scrub. Scrub consists of young trees, bushes and shrubs like hawthorn and gorse, and patches of brambles and nettle. And if this is left unmanaged, this will develop or succeed into woodland. In total, Guernsey has about 8% woodland cover, which is lower than the UK average of about 13%. Our woodlands are in poor condition due to lack of age diversity, the presence of non-native species, lack of mature trees, and low species diversity. Woodland cover on Herm has fluctuated as the island was largely deforested in the 19th century, and any woodland currently on the island is from natural succession or has been planted. In total, Herm has 13% woodland cover. We'll now quickly run through the woodland categories on Herm. Semi-natural broadleaf woodland has increased by 150% since 1999. Planted broadleaf has decreased by 35%. Planted coniferous has increased by 38%. Plantation mixed woodland has increased by 823% since 1999. And you can see these increases on the graph here, with Herm being the brown colour. And there's no plantation woodland on Herm as of 2018. Native species associated with woodlands include English bluebells, which are an early flowering plant found in woodlands and along woodland edges. They're a good source of food for our native pollinator species. Woodlands are good habitat for nesting birds and support many species of fungi. We're now going to look at the woodland categories in Guernsey in more detail. Semi-natural broadleaf woodland. Historically, this habitat has varied due to changing land use. Most woodland was first lost in Guernsey before the Iron Age, and very little current mature woodland predates World War II due to clearance of fuel during the occupation. There is a lack of species diversity due to these periods of deforestation. This habitat category has increased by 54% from 1999 to 2018. This picture was taken at the Silby Nature Reserve, which is managed by La Société and is a publicly accessible space. This site has been owned by La Société since 1975, when the land was donated to them. The reserve is about 5 hectares, and the main habitats include the woodland area, wet meadow, scrub, and semi-improved grassland. Large tortoiseshell butterflies can be seen here, and these species are actually extinct in the UK. Planted broadleaf woodland is planted as part of conservation efforts and for amenity purposes, leading to a mixed species composition of native and non-native species. This category has increased by 223% from 1999 to 2018. This picture was taken at Signal Wood, which was planted in 2012 at Saint-Germain Nature Reserve. This site used to be an old quarry and then a landfill, and has now been converted to a nature reserve. It's also a publicly accessible space. Planted mixed woodland is planted as part of conservation efforts, but usually within large gardens of woodland estates. Conservation planting usually favours native species over non-native conifers, so the biodiversity value of this habitat will depend on the tree species selected. This habitat category has increased by 650% from 1999 to 2018, and this picture was taken at Sunray Park. Plantation woodland mostly consists of orchards or trees planted for agriculture. It's usually a monoculture of species or a single tree type. They may only support limited biodiversity depending on the management of this habitat. Ground flora may be heavily managed to allow for easier harvesting of commercial areas. Historically, this habitat covered a much bigger area when cider making was a more profitable business, and it was not actually a habitat category in the original 1999 Habitat Survey. It's increased by 123% since 2010 to 2018. This picture was taken at Jardin de Lorette. This area used to be an old greenhouse site and was donated to La Société in 1997. The site was cleared, and in 1998, Guernsey conservation volunteers planted 80 cider apple trees of 3 French varieties. The site is managed by La Société and is publicly accessible. Planted coniferous woodland. Coniferous woodland does not occur naturally in Guernsey, with most conifers planted over the last 120 years, and this has been mainly planted with Monterey pine trees. This habitat has increased by 9.5% since 1999, mostly due to planting. Coniferous woodlands can be considered less biodiverse than our native woodlands, as they grow thick canopies which prevent sunlight from reaching the woodland floor and prevents understory species from establishing. They do still support some biodiversity. Large numbers of bats use our coniferous woodlands, and rare fungi can be found in these areas. This picture was taken at the Get. Species-rich hedgerows are very important as corridors for nature, connect up fragmented habitats, allowing for dispersal and colonisation across the islands. They're used by many animals as habitat and food resources and have been classed as a priority habitat. They also provide nesting habitats for birds. They're often composed of native plants such as hawthorn, blackthorn, and beech. Native hedge plants are important for wildlife as they provide flowers and fruit, which are a vital resource for many species. Hedges require cutting and maintenance in order to support the highest levels of biodiversity possible. This habitat is in decline and has decreased in length by 52% since 1999. This is shown on this graph here, with the lighter colour representing species-poor hedges, but the darker colour represents species-rich hedges, and you can see that this block of colour has reduced by half over the 3 surveys. As hedges have a high ecological value, the loss of hedgerows is likely to contribute to an associated loss of biodiversity. While knowing what species and habitats are present on island is crucial for conservation, it's also important to know the causes and rate of change to the natural environment. We're then able to manage and mitigate the negative impacts. These changes can occur naturally, which are usually due to human activities. State in Nature 2024 identifies the primary threats or pressures to our habitats and species, and also notes the cumulative or combined effect of these multiple pressures and the subsequent impact on our natural environment. By increasing our understanding of the pressures facing our natural environment, as well as improving understanding about species and habitats, we can introduce targeted conservation measures to try and address the imbalance brought about by negative human impacts. Threats to woodland include invasive non-native species, diseases, and lack of appropriate management. This photo here shows premature yellowing of sycamore leaves, which seems to be a sign of sooty bark disease. We'll discuss this more in the next slide. Invasive non-native species are plants or animals which have been introduced to an area by humans, for example through the global movement of goods. They're then able to thrive to the detriment of local species, the economy, or public health. Invasives are a considerable threat to biodiversity and can cause major problems on islands. Invasive species will outcompete our local species, they will predate natives, bring in disease, hybridize with natives, cause habitat alteration and degradation, and ultimately negatively alter the balance of ecosystem. Many invasive species can reproduce rapidly, or they're generalists, which is the key to their quick spread and establishment. This photo in the top left corner is an example of an invasive species, 3-cornered garlic, locally known as stinking onions. This plant will outcompete our native bluebell species as they can reproduce much quicker. Tree disease can have widespread detrimental impacts on our tree populations. They're usually caused by fungi, which may be spread by beetles and other species. These diseases are then imported into the island accidentally. Diseases such as Dutch elm disease are responsible for the historic loss of the endemic species, the Guernsey elm. Surviving elm can grow to around 15 foot before they're hit by the disease again. The Guernsey elm was widely affected, as many of them were descended from a single clone. Another disease, ash dieback, has led to the death of many ash trees on island. This middle picture here shows an example of a tree with ash dieback. The bottom picture and the picture to the right are examples of sooty bark disease, which is characterized by blackening of the outer surface of the branch, and this disease is confirmed by lab diagnosis. Some diseases may not have such devastating impacts, or there's a potential that the severity of disease may decline over time. This threat needs further monitoring to help us understand more about diseases that affect our tree species. Lack of appropriate management can reduce the biodiversity potential of sites. Woodlands need careful long-term management to ensure a mix of species and age diversity and to maintain the condition of the woodland. Inappropriate management may allow for invasive species and pests to flourish to the detriment of native species. Careful consideration is needed when tree planting to ensure that species are selected in keeping with the sites. Follow-up management is also required to ensure that trees are able to grow unhindered, for example by tree protective guards, and that they're not outcompeted by species like bramble. Mature woodlands also require management, such as pollarding and coppicing, to provide a range of habitats and allow slower growing species to thrive. This also creates areas of open space which increase the amount of light able to penetrate to understory plants. Threats to hedges include replanting with non-native species, placement with fencing, and inappropriate management. Hedgerows are frequently replanted with non-native evergreen species like Gracillinia. These hedgerows do not produce any flowers or fruit, and few species will feed on the leaves, so they're therefore unsuitable for supporting wildlife. Some hedges are being replaced altogether by fencing. This is further reducing the amount of habitat available to be used by wildlife. Fencing also acts as a barrier for wildlife, preventing species from travelling naturally through different areas. This affects species like hedgehogs and other small mammals, isolating them and reducing the amount of area able to be accessed for foraging. Inappropriate management. So the post-war demand for self-sufficient food in the UK reduced the amount of biodiverse natural habitats. Intensification of farming methods led to the loss of ecologically important farmland habitat like hedgerows. This has happened in Guernsey on a smaller scale and has caused land to become less suitable for wildlife. Intensive land management and also lack of management can drive habitat changes and cause species declines. Our hedgerows could help to create a network between natural habitats and sympathetically managed areas like gardens, improving habitat connectivity. Inappropriate management reduces the suitability of hedgerows in supporting biodiversity. Roadside hedges must be cut twice a year, and this regime does help to preserve hedgerows by eliminating rank species like bracken. But some hedgerows are poorly managed and they're cut too often and too severely. Mechanical cutting will damage tree and hedge plants, causing branches to be smashed and ripped rather than being cut. What can we do to help? There are many great organisations already supporting the natural environment in the work that they do. For example, Guernsey conservation volunteers, seen in this picture here, have been trialling ways to remove stinking onions from bluebell woods to preserve our native bluebell species. There's always room for more work to be done. Individuals, businesses and the government can all play their part in helping to conserve the natural environment, whether it's through corporate support of local charities or individuals and businesses participating in citizen science projects. There are many small and big changes that we can implement into our daily lives which will benefit nature. Here are some examples of what you can do up on the screen. Islanders can contribute to addressing gaps in our knowledge and helping to protect our natural environment by recording sightings of local wildlife. Apps like iRecord or iNaturalist allow you to submit sightings in the field, and these apps will then link in with the Guernsey Biological Record Centre, so the data can be accessed from one location. Submission of sightings can include native or invasive species, and at a minimum need only include the location, the date, and the number seen. This is important to help understand abundance and distribution of species across Guernsey and Herm. Attaching photos will also help for the data to be verified. Guernsey Trees for Life is a local organisation dedicated to promoting the benefits of native trees and hedging, and they aim to plant over 1,000 tree and hedge plants every planting season in Guernsey. In 12 months over 2022 and 2023, they planted a total of 1,484 native tree and hedge plants, which was made up of 801 hedging plants and 683 trees over 19 separate sites. They only plant trees on suitable sites which are not being used for other purposes, so they will not plant on marshy grassland, wetlands, or agriculture land, as these are already important habitats in their own right and land is needed for agriculture. If you have land you think may be suitable for planting, you can get in touch with them via their website. Citizen science is a great way of connecting people to nature and collecting large amounts of useful data. It's really important to have data as you can't manage what you don't measure. Citizen science can help monitor species that use hedgerows and woodland and will help to give an indication of the health of these habitats. The UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme and Bee Walk are examples of citizen science projects. They involve walking a predetermined route during the appropriate seasons and counting the butterflies and bees seen during this time. Both these projects are being launched by the Nature Commission next year, and if you'd like to be involved, then please get in touch with us. The BTO Breeding Bird Survey is a citizen science project that the Nature Commission will be promoting in the future. The project involves walking a route in an allocated 1 kilometre square twice between April and June and recording breeding birds. Some of the habitats in these squares will consist of woodland and species-rich hedges. Many of these citizen science surveys are national projects, and by providing data, we're helping to build up a picture of the state of nature more widely in the British Isles, as well as in Guernsey and Herm. When cutting hedgerows, follow the guidance available. This provides advice on the sustainable cutting of roadside hedgerows to allow animals and plants to thrive. A minimum of 10 centimetres of vegetation should be left after cutting, to allow vegetation to re-establish and to reduce rank species such as nettles. Inside hedges can be trimmed much more infrequently, as little as every 3 years. Avoid cutting hedges during the bird breeding season, which is usually between March and August. A great tool to see what habitats are near you is Digimap Guernsey, which has an online mapping tool. You can add different environmental layers which show the habitat categories for the 3 different surveys. The full State of Nature 2024 report is available on our website or via this QR code, and the State of Nature 2024 summary report is also available here. Please do give us a follow on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. You can check out our website and the details are up on this slide. If you have any other questions or you'd like to get in contact with us, please do email us office@naturecommission.gg. Thank you very much for listening.